Hey, what is up everybody? In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about my eclipse day. Where I live was in the path of totality, so total solar eclipse. Pretty rare event for a particular area, so extremely rare. But I had kind of an interesting experience, and I think, anyone who's into photography, no matter what kind of photography you're into, when something major is going to happen, you can't stop thinking about like, am I going to capture it? How am I going to try and capture it? How much effort am I going to put into trying to capture it? So anyways, it's been nonstop hype around here leading up into it, being in the path of totality here. And then also, I'm in Akron, Cuyahoga Falls area, and then Cleveland being the bigger city up north, also even being more in the path of totality, so totality would last a little longer there. So that's our big media market, and so it's just been nuts. Then the whole social media thing too, so pretty much every organization, every museum, nonprofit, anyone who owned a building or a location or was near a park was planning something for this. So the hype was nonstop. It actually kind of was turning me off. I've never seen a total solar eclipse, so didn't realize what kind of deal it would be. And, I watched the one in 2017. We had partial here. I stepped outside the studio door, stacked some filters, took a couple photos, came back inside. You couldn't even tell there was anything going on if you didn't know something was going on. So yeah, just all the hype. And the fact that it is April in Ohio, to me means it's almost always going to be cloudy or rainy. So the idea that everyone is getting so hyped and making all these preparations when the strong chances that there's not going to be anything we're able to see anyways. So I was like, whatever. So I kind of just wasn't really paying attention. In my mind, I'm like, I'll wait till like a couple days before and then I'll see if I want to pop outside. I didn't really plan to buy tickets for anything, Oh, that was my cat. I thought, maybe if I feel like it, I'll probably get a bike ride in. Maybe I'll ride somewhere and see it cool. And then I'm like, well, if the weather turns out to be good, I wouldn't mind seeing, people in all their glasses. I thought that would be the cool picture. For some reason, this Devo picture is what I have in mind. So anyways, the day before I was out for a bike ride with some friends, there was a chance, it was Sunday, Monday was eclipse day. It was supposed to be 50 to 60% cloud cover. So not great, but not horrible. And after that ride, we had kind of been talking, why don't we get together? Why don't we do a ride? No one was going to be working, it turned out. In the group chat, my friends Brad and Ames said, hey, we're thinking of riding to Ames' sister's house in Lakewood. And so then I messaged in there, I was like, hey, Ben, would you want to ride up to Cleveland? Wouldn't mind riding up there. And Ben was in. And so that kind of became the thing. No real plan, no real destination. We started to work out what we were going to do and how we would meet up. So I met up with Ben and my buddy Aaron down in the valley, just 10 minutes from here on the bikes. And then we rode out to Peninsula, right down the towpath, where we met up with the rest of the gang, Ames, Brad, and Erin, my girlfriend. Yeah, the hardest one to remember, right? I'm gonna get in trouble for that if I leave it in. Anyways, so we met up there, we had a coffee. I took a couple pictures. Again, there's all this stuff about, all these warnings about pointing your camera or your phone at the sun, which makes sense in a certain way. But I was thinking again, I'm like, I do point my camera at the sun. And so I actually did and did it, with the aperture, as closed as it could be. And that's, you get the sun stars. So I was like, yeah, you can take pictures of the sun as long as you don't just, burn up your camera by pointing it on there. But gear-wise, what I decided to bring with me, and again, I wasn't prepared. I hadn't been studying or doing research because, like I said, I wasn't all hyped about it, which I'll get into, I guess, in closing, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. But so I decided to bring the R5, which I'm recording on right now. When I ride my bike, I usually bring the R8 because of its small size. It might look a little bigger right now. I have an adapter and a vintage Minolta lens on here. I've been playing with this setup a lot, so there'll be a video about vintage lenses on the R8 down the road. But so I usually bring the R8 and some of the small lenses that go with it. I've made a bunch of videos about Canon's plastic lenses and how actually usable they are. And I just love this, just throw this right over my shoulder in general. But I brought a smaller camera bag, my Peak Design. And then in the bag, I put the 70 to 200, which I made a video about. I recently bought this and I'm absolutely loving it. But I knew if you're going to try and get something of the sun, you're going to need a long lens. Plus, man, I love having this anyways for the people shots and everything. So then I was thinking, they say you need 16 stops of neutral density. They sell all the solar filters. Like, again, I said I wasn't hyped, so I wasn't planning ahead. But I do have this variable ND that's 5.3 stops up to 12 stops. I barely ever used it for anything because it's actually too dark for most things that I need to shoot. It's kind of a mistake purchase. I've used it once or twice on video gigs, but yeah, $220 filter that I barely ever touch. Well, it today was the day. And then my other ND, the one I use more for, my video work, goes up to 3 stops. And this one is a much more usable filter. So I figured I could stack them and get 15. That's close enough with the shutter speed and closing down the app. All right, well, I had to reset everything. My camera keeps shutting down. When I was setting this up, it was shutting down. I am not in a mode that should cause the R5 any issues. It's just 24 FPS, 4K, 1/50th of a second. So I don't know what's going on. There's no overheat warning. So here we are. Going to try it again and continue on with where I left off. So yeah, gear choices. Camera on my back, R5 on my back with the 16-35. That is what I wanted for, it's a 2.8. It's an LEF lens that I adapt just like I adapt the 70-200. Had that one forever. It's such a lens that comes in handy for stuff. So, that was how I would ride and, pull out and take some shots while we were getting up there. Obviously I had my GoPro, so the ride footage. So it was really cool because again, nobody in the group really had a ton of expectations. But by the time we got to Peninsula, it was beautiful and sunny. We were already shedding layers. Then we got out to Station Road, another 10 miles past there, and it was really warm. So it was like, man, the predictions were way off. It was already getting close to the 70s, shed even more layers. I mean, we were pretty much down to t-shirts at this point. And so got closer to Cleveland and stopped to meet up with Aaron's wife, Kat. And when we were up there, that's when we could start to finally see part of the sun being gone with the Eclipse glasses and all that. I didn't try to take any pictures at that point yet of the actual what was going on. There wasn't really a purpose to it, just the sun with a tiny little chunk out. But took some pictures of us and our friends, and we were hanging out. We were talking to people. I do have my laptop here, so I could kind of go through stuff. So yeah, we were just kind of getting a view of what was going on. Again, totally nonchalant, totally no plans yet. Ended up heading on out from there, already the mood was changing. I was already starting to believe the hype, and all the hype that came from 2017 of all the traffic jams and stuff, I think is why the media was warning people so much. It wasn't materializing at all. We could see the bridges over the Cuyahoga Valley. That's what we were riding up through the whole way. None of the freeways east-west or anything looked that crowded. The towpath, all the trailheads, it was cool to see different people setting up at different points when we were getting through the national park. But by the time we were getting more towards Cleveland, it felt like a normal day, not even quite a weekend level day out on the towpath. So really busy through the peninsula, but besides that, so I started to think, man, this is not going to be as wild as I thought. Where do we want to go? So, because when Aaron was talking about his wife driving up and meeting us, jumping on her bike somewhere closer, I'm like, she's going to get stuck up there. So we made a loop through the flats, which is kind of in Cleveland. It gets down in the valley where the Cuyahoga River is, and there's bars and restaurants. It's kind of cool to see who was out, and the patios were starting to fill up, and so many people took the day off that people were hanging out. Again, there it felt kind of like a weekend. We stopped and we made the decision then. In the back of my mind, the whole time had been this old Coast Guard station. There's this old cool Art Deco Coast Guard station right at the mouth of the Cuyahoga River on Lake Erie. It's always been one of my favorite places. They had recently completed a bridge to get you there. 2 bridges actually, one for the bikes, one is a swinging drawbridge that had been closed forever. I was always mixed feelings about it because I loved the old Coast Guard station, took effort to get to. You had to go way out to Edgewater Park and then come way back in along the coast to get there because train tracks and the other parts of the river. So for this day, I was really thinking there's no way we can get up there with the way the crowds are going to be. But now I'm thinking we could. And the other thing was, I was like, or do you want to go into Public Square where there's probably a lot of people? So that's the big office towers in Cleveland sit around there, and it's a, public square from Cleveland's founding. So cool little spot, but no lake views from right there. And there's other spots where you could see the lake in Cleveland, but I had my favorite. Everyone was down to go over to the old Coast Guard station. So we backtracked, crossed a bridge, got ourselves out there, and went out on the fishing pier, and everyone's out there fishing. We're talking to some characters. Now you could really see a pretty good chunk of the sun being gone. Again, we're still all being really nonchalant about everything and not overhyping it. This is where I started to think what am I gonna wanna do? So I took a couple pictures of the sun and trying to get the chunk out. And I'm like, wow, these are awful. They're just blurry. It's just the sun real hazy. There was a little bit of cloud coverage at this point. Not enough that the sun wasn't coming through, but it was just kind of Oh man, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I can't capture this because it's only the center of the scene is bright. I captured this cool picture of this airplane coming over. I wish I really had my settings right, and I probably could have even got it crossing the eclipse if I had been quick enough, but I wasn't. And then it dawned on me, I'm like, you know what? To shoot the sun crisp, you have to shoot so fast and with so much, filtration or, whatever. So unfortunately, I could look at my metadata here to see what I set the camera at, but I didn't write down, I wasn't paying attention to what I was putting filters at. So anyways, this would not be a how-to video. So if you're here for the how-to, there's a lot of great stuff out there. Like I said, I was winging it and it was almost not an afterthought because, I was leaving with this stuff, but no pre-preparation, no tripod, nothing like that. Like I said, didn't even know where we were gonna end up. So took a couple photos, then I realized, no, you need to max out like the shutter speed and everything, 1/8,000th of a second, like smallest aperture possible. So that's what I ended up doing. And I'm like, oh, okay, there's a couple cool photos, just of like I really like this one of the sliver. I got a really sharp one of that. Didn't even take much Photoshop. Definitely cropping in. 200 is not nearly long enough to get those really nice big eclipse shots. I'm guessing 600, 1200 is what people were doing to get those really well. 45 megapixels on the R5 made it so I could crop in though pretty substantially. So it worked. Took a lot of practice in editing to try and get like what I wanted out of the actual eclipse shots. But I just kept playing with the settings, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyways, as it got closer and closer to totality, the light became really interesting. Shadows become really sharp. Usually because the sun is coming from more of like a direct direction. I'm not sure I totally understand that, but I heard other people talking about it. Very noticeable. An interesting thing is it's not magic hour light when the sun's even at like 97, 98% covered. It's very white. Something I just found super unique and interesting, and I heard a lot of other people talk about it. You definitely notice it as a photographer that it's just this very clean and white light. When totality hit, I know I snapped a few of the eclipse right away, played around with the settings. Then I was like, everyone says, you should just enjoy this moment. And I'm like, I think we were getting a little over 3 minutes of totality up in Cleveland. And I thought of that, and like for a few seconds, I'm standing there like, yeah, this is amazing. It's the coolest thing you'll ever see. You can feel the temperature plummeting. There's this little wind that blows in right when it starts. And I mean, the sunset becomes 360, which is something I didn't know about. Like, again, I didn't do any research, which again, is good or bad. We'll talk about that in the conclusion. But yeah, everywhere you look and being on the lake, we could see everywhere. We could see downtown Cleveland. We could see behind us, behind the Coast Guard station, all across the lake, sunset all the way around. Super, super cool. Then I was like, I enjoy things by trying to capture them. Like that's who I am. That's why I've become a photographer. It's why I do it for a living. It's why it's all, even before I did it for a living, it was my hobby. So I'm like, forget that advice. Capture this. So, I ran to the other side, tried to get some photos of downtown Cleveland, some dark photos of the Coast Guard station in totality, a little stuff of the, that sunset vibe I was just describing. And then I went back to try and get some more of totality. And when I was doing that, I was basically at that point I think I was just sliding the ISO over to see which one would work best and know that I could even look at them later. So this is one thing I saw. If you know who Marquise Brownlee is, MKBHD, probably the biggest tech YouTuber there is. I was watching the podcast he does a video on YouTube, but it's a podcast other places. And they happened to be in Ohio shooting a car commercial. They realized they wanted to go see the eclipse and they're like, oh, we have a shoot booked. And they're like, oh, it's in the path of totality. They were talking about this, and when I made my bike video about the eclipse, I think I was overly apologetic about like how absolutely awesome our day was and how amazing it was, because I didn't want to make anyone feel bad. Like if you were near the eclipse or you couldn't get there or it rained, or like me, you just didn't realize what a big deal it was. They were talking about if you've seen a 99% solar eclipse, you have not gotten 1% of how cool an eclipse is. And it's absolutely true. Like that last moment when the sun is still there, they call it the diamond ring. I didn't take a photo of it. When that is like that, it is still pretty much daylight outside. Like I said, these weird characteristics of the light has come on, so there is something to it, but it's still so bright. Even at 99.9%, it is not till the moment of totality where everything changes and like the level of darkness to almost night changes. Being on the lake, this was super cool too, because there had been all the seabirds in the mouth of the river and the boats always kicking up birds and they're always going for the fish. They were gone. Just like you hear, like people who go and watch them out in nature and everything goes to nighttime. It was wild just to see like the birds had been everywhere. And then a guy next to us, he's like, look, the birds are gone. And he looked out, it was like, birds totally gone. So super, super cool. My favorite photo is a composite. I know a lot of people, I don't believe, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, that there is a way to capture the wider angle of the eclipse with a foreground without compositing. I mean, so you could see here, this is the before, and then you could see when I composited. So I shot a wider shot of the Coast Guard station with my friend standing there as the silhouettes and the sunset back there. But you could see the sun, and if you see most photos that people were just like posting that photo of, you could tell there's a little black, you know, in the center of the sun, but then everything else just blows out up there and it's kind of a blurry mess like I was doing earlier in the day. So I really believe you need at least 2 exposures to get this right. So basically I took that wide one, swapped lenses, took a picture of the eclipse, took the eclipse picture and matched the size, and I used a blending mode in Photoshop to make them work out right. But to me, that's the only way to do it. But that is, I feel like this photo is what it looked like, you know, to be there. So it's truer to what was going on. Depends on your opinion and all that. But I do feel like if you shot a clear picture of the eclipse with a foreground and then you were bringing those shadows up, you would be bringing them up so much and using so much software and manipulation, it would be just as much as compositing 2 photos for a worse result. I'm happy with that result. And yeah, these sunset shots. And then there's this other thing called the solar prominences, which everyone at the time kind of thought were solar flares, but they're not. And I did get a couple with it sharp. They're red, and there's this little triangle one that kind of everyone got. And then there's another, like a lot of people were showing. And then there's another one that kind of was longer and snaky. But these things last, I think, weeks or months. So they're not quick flares. They're like plasma things that you could only really see during an eclipse. So I haven't really, just like I said, I wasn't really super prepared for this, and I haven't looked into the editing. Being that I did shoot a bunch of different exposures of it, when you've seen the eclipse photos with the amazing corona of the sun like spreading out, those are all composites too. They're taking like, you know, they're HDRing all that stuff together. I don't think it's worth it for me to do it just because people do it so well and had all the right equipment, and that's how I feel about it. I feel like I got the vibe of the day, and right after totality ended, you could see there's still this really, really cool light, so I kind of walked around and got some more photos of that. The total solar eclipse, if there's ever a chance, don't miss it. Photographer or just to stand there, it is like nothing else. So this is about 2 weeks ago. I'm recording this on a Friday. It was a week ago Monday. Everywhere I've gone for events and everything I've done since then, I've talked about to everybody where they were, you know, being in the path of totality. It doesn't matter. Everyone is like, it's the most amazing thing. It's way beyond what I expected. That is just the theme over and over again. I love to hear the stories. I spent like all last week scrolling social media, which I don't do as often anymore, even Facebook, just to see what everybody was up to, just because everyone was so hyped on it. It was just so cool. So my upstairs tenant, well, actually on this side, my friend Jeff, who lives in one of my apartments, he said he just got home from work. He stepped out on the back deck and watched it and was blown away. When I went over to the drive-thru across the street to get some beer later that week, I was talking to the guy over there, and he was like, nope, I was working. He was like, I saw the total solar eclipse from good old Gene's drive-thru. I was like, how was it though? And he was like, it was amazing. So he said cars stopped coming about 15 minutes before and no one came till about 10 minutes after. So he said they were slammed on either side of that because, you know, so many people had the days off, so they're buying beers and cigarettes and whatever you get at a drive-thru. But yeah, I don't know. That's just kind of like my story. So thinking about it, would it have been better if I was prepared? And I don't really know the answer to that because I feel like if I was worried about getting the perfect shot and I was going to do the whole foreground thing, like I've seen these really cool photos by people I know of like the Terminal Tower in Cleveland as the foreground or whatever it may be at the different party at the Akron Art Museum and all this stuff. And it's great. They spent their whole day like getting set up to get that perfect shot. I would have nothing to do with that shot besides post it to Instagram and be like, look how cool my shot was, which I already am happy with what I got because it's not what I do. I'm a commercial photographer. So it's like to get that nervous about it and spend that much time researching it, also with the fact that in my mind it might not even have, you know, could have been cloudy. wasn't really worth it, and then it adds another level of stress. I would say on the fact of the eclipse, I wish I had done more research just into the things that were going to happen, like the diamond ring. Maybe I would have tried to capture that. I don't know. And just like there are certain colors you're supposed to look at, like the grass is supposed to look really interesting. And someone said the color red, Aaron's wife, Kat, and my red bike was right there. I don't think I ever remembered to look at it. Whatever. I know MKBHD said he downloaded an app that gave you like minute by minute of like cool things to check out as it was going on. I think that kind of stuff would have been cool. At the same level, it's just like everything with photography. You're like, when do I put the camera down and enjoy something? And even though I still decided to use my camera, it's like, when do you just enjoy something on any level versus overthinking it and worrying about it? I don't know. I'd be curious if you were in the path of totality. Tell me your story. Tell me how awesome it was. I haven't met a single person who doesn't think it was the coolest thing they've ever seen. So if you weren't in the path of totality, did you try to capture the partial? Like I said, I did go out in 2017. Again, same thing. I'm like, who cares? Partial, doesn't matter. Didn't buy Eclipse glasses, but 10 minutes before, I'm like, I can't help myself, and I'm stacking every filter I own in here and going out and at least getting some kind of shot, because it's who I am. That's why I make these videos. That's why I carry this stuff everywhere I go. So cat's going bonks when I'm trying to do my outro. I can hear him running around. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Like I said, I got a lot more in the works. I'm just super busy. I'd love to keep up with the weekly schedule, but I don't know. Life has to come first at this point. Work has to come first. And I skipped out on that whole Monday, and I still feel like I'm catching up from it, but totally worth it. And like, again, I'm not saying that we ended up in the perfect spot, the spot that I wanted to be in. But like I said, it sounds like no matter what you did, if you just stepped out the door, it would have been great. I wish I could have watched it from a million places. I wish I could see what my building looked like during this total solar eclipse. But yeah, this is a rambly one. I don't know. Oh man, this shows me I'm at 17 minutes, and that's after the camera shut off. So whatever I got before that. Hopefully there's some value here. Subscribe, like, share. I don't know. You don't have to.